Okay, class, here we go. So today I'm going to do a really basic introduction to InDesign, Creative Cloud. Um, InDesign is a layout program. So to totally understand this, we're not going to be creating graphics. We're not going to be fixing photos. It's a layout. So there's two main tools that are necessary. You need a picture box where you can put items like your Illustrator documents or PSDs or any JPEGs or PNGs or whatever you are putting into your document. So there's picture boxes and then there's text boxes. These are the two really basic properties of InDesign. And if you can work with those, that's the whole beginning part of this project. All right, so today we're going to put together a really simple resume. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to make a new document. So I'm going to do File, New. And this is what the end result's going to look like. And when we're new, we have to set up some presets. So we're going to do 8.5 by 11. It's going to be a standard page size. It's only going to be one page. So this is where a lot of the times you will use InDesign for a multi-page document. If you're doing a branding book, if you're doing a multi-page resume, if you're doing a book, any kind of book or booklet or brochure. So thinking about multi-page documents that have a lot of text and that you want to lay out, a magazine for instance, this is where it's really going to come in handy to do multiple pages and facing pages so the pages could face each other. We're just kind of starting with basics, so that's fine. So we're only going to have one page. Now columns are kind of interesting. So columns are kind of setting up your background grid in a way. That's what I use it for. And I'm using for this example a 2-column layout. So I'm going to keep it at 2 columns. This doesn't mean you're forced in a 2-column. It's just the grids in the background. And we can also say how big of a gutter we want. So maybe I want something a little bit larger. Here's margin, which I'm going to keep at the standard 0.25, and then if you needed a bleed, which I don't need for a resume, nothing's coming off the edges of the page, but if I did, I'd be adding a bleed of 0.125. All right, so I'm going to hit create, and we have our standard layout. So when we're looking at this, let me just make sure I'm going to reset my essentials. Here we go. This is kind of what you're going to see on the side. So we have a couple swatches, color, stroke, link, pages. Pages are really helpful for multi-page documents. This is where you can scroll through and jump through pages. Now with a single document, we're not really going to need pages at this point. Layers, you're really familiar with layers. Again, this is something that you would need in more advanced situations, but maybe not for a one-page resume. Links. This is going to link to any of your other documents that you're bringing in. Like we're going to bring in a logo today. Stroke, obviously for lines, color for your color picker, and swatches. And we are going to add a swatch later today. So a couple things that we really need to add here is some type tools. So if you go down to Window Type, we want to open up our character palette. And I like to take my character palette and just kind of drop it in over here to set that up. I would also highly recommend that you have your paragraph. So if we wanted to center something, and also your character, your styles. There we are, character styles. So that's under styles. This is a way that we can save some of our headline styles and our body copy that we can reuse over and over again, which is perfect for a resume and any multi-page document. So you want to make sure to have that open too. I'm going to push this right into that. All right, so we're all set up with our palettes. And if you hit this little arrow, it's going to pop them all out so you can kind of work with them if you wanted to. InDesign has a very similar layout to Illustrator. If you look at the tools, we have the selection tool and the direct selection tool, which work the same, the type tool, the line tool, the rectangle tool, which also has the circle tool and polygon tool underneath. We have a gradient, color picker, all the usuals, and then plus a fill and a stroke. So this is going to look very similar over in this area. So let's go back to the basics. Picture box and text box. If you know those two things, we're in pretty good shape going forward. So let's add our resume logo to begin with. So I'm going to bring, this is the, now it's not called a picture box anymore. It used to be. Now it's the rectangle frame tool. And I'm going to make the size that I want my logo. So I want it to be about this big at the top and nice and centered. And then I'm going to have to file place in, or Command D if you're on a Mac, Control D if you're on a PC, to be able to place in this logo. And I have my sample, and I'm actually placing in my AI document. So this is my actual Illustrator document. InDesign can handle that. There it is. It's too big, that's all right. I'd rather have it too big than too small. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it, or control click, and we're going to go down to fitting. And there's all these different ways that we can fit that logo into that picture box. So we're kind of now fitting it together. So I'm going to try to fit content to frame. So you can see how that kind of fits all the content to frame. Now, you can play around with this a little bit and see fit content proportionally. What's this? Some center content. Again, you can kind of play around with these and see what works best for you. Now, something to remember is that this logo is linked. You can see the little link up here. That means this logo, that AI document, always has to stay with the InDesign document. We can't throw out your logo now. It has to always stay together. If you would accidentally move that logo somewhere else, it would break this file and the logo would no longer be in the document. All right, so we have that set up. So this is kind of my header. And then I'm going to set up a footer down here at the bottom. So for the footer, I'm going to use my line tool and I'm going to draw a straight line. I'm going to hold shift with the keyboard and put that in place. So it has no fill, no stroke. So I'm going to hit the default, so it's a black stroke. And I want to add this yellow color, my color scheme, to my swatches palette. So if I look at my swatches, I'm going to drag them over so we can see. InDesign only gives us a very, very minimal amount of swatches to work with. These are all the colors that we could pick from. So I want to add this yellow. Very easy to do. I'm going to go to my color eyedropper, and I'm going to click on that color, my yellow, there it is. It shows up here in my swatches, and I can click and drag it down and add it to my swatches so I can reuse that. You can also see here that it was made, it's an RGB color. So, we could always change that as well from RGB. Let's see, I just want it to be CMYK. When we're dealing with InDesign, we're always dealing with CMYK because this is something that we're going to print out. So converting it is not a bad idea if this original logo was RGB, which in this case it was. All right, so we have that here. Now I could actually use that color down here in my stroke. So you can see I already added that. Now, the next thing I want to do is add a text box. So unlike Illustrator and Photoshop where I can go in my text tool and just click and type, in InDesign you have to make a text box. So I have to click and drag and make a text box for the space where I want the text to be. And then I'm going to type in whatever I want. So this is my email address. Oops, I don't need my real name. I'm going to do 2 space bars in between each one. What else do we need? Our phone number. And then maybe our Behance. Okay, not too bad. So we have that all in here. Now what I can do is I'm going to stylize this a little bit. So what I need to know, and I had it written down, is my 2 typefaces that I was using in my logo. So I think this top one's Benton and the bottom one is Lucida Bright. So I'm going to make this bottom one go to my character palette, and type in one of those two fonts. So this one I'm going to do my Benton. Let me find the actual one I used, which is bold. There we go. And I don't think I can make that. Nope, I can't make it any lighter. That's the color it is. And I'm going to make the size smaller. So I'm going to take it down to like 11, maybe even 10 points. You really don't want large text on your resume. It looks, again, kind of like a children's book, you know, text too large. So most of our text is going to be around 10 point. That's a normal size for a resume, 10, 11, sometimes even 9 point. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Whoops, what happened there? I got too small. I'm going to keep that 10. And I'm going to open my paragraph, and I'm going to center that in the middle. I'm going to go back to character, and I'm going to kern it out or track it out. So this is a way that we can add some space between characters. Now, you don't want this to look like difficult to read. So I would never do that for body copy. This would only be for like headlines and so on and so forth. Maybe I want to just add a little bit of pizzazz to this and think about how sometimes links are underlined. How about if we underline these links, and I'm going to use the line tool for that, so then I can do a fun, oh, I lost my swatches palette. Put that back over here so we don't lose that again. And I'm going to make it our yellow color. And do the same thing under the Behance, because these are both not clickable, but could be clickable if this was a web page. Nice. Now notice how that on our page, when I zoom out, we have all these, we see our margin. This is kind of our safe zone for printing. And we have our columns here. I'm going to move this down to give myself a little bit more space. We don't got to bring my strokes with me. We don't need so much space. So I'm going to take that all the way down right below. There we go. And make sure that's centered. Now, it has all these lines. So this is kind of, if you have this 2 columns, and you can have that 2 columns by clicking that little double arrow in the upper left hand. They have preview and normal. So preview is going to show you what it's going to look like when it's printed. It's going to get rid of all those rules and guides and all those extras, which I like to look at sometimes because it looks cleaner. When I'm working, I keep the grids, right? We want to make sure everything's lined up perfectly, especially on your resume. But now we basically have our letterhead set up here. This might be a good place for your layers that I would name this letterhead, and I would just lock that layer so I don't move it. And I make a new layer on top of it, just like in Illustrator with this new layer button. And then this could actually be my resume. So you can use layers in that way to have just your letterhead on one and your resume on the other. All right, now let's do your resume. So first thing we're doing is going to have to copy and paste some of our text in. And I know I want to organize this into 2 columns. You can kind of see how I organized it here. This is information I used from another student's resume. It still has room for a little bit more, but I think this is a good starting point. And you can see a clear hierarchy, which is what I'm looking for. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over the education, technical, and design strengths. And I'm going to copy this because I already typed this out. And then over here, I'm going to make another text box. So I'm going to be on my text tool, and I have to decide, again, you know, the size of this. Maybe like so. We'll see how that works so far. And I'm going to paste without formatting, so you can kind of see how it would be if you paste from your Microsoft Word document. So pasting from a PDF or anything, just pasting it in, it's just going to be the default text. And then I'm going to bring in the other side too. So you would go back to your Microsoft Word document, go to your text tool, you know, copy and paste. I'm going to try to keep this balanced. Oops, I don't want to do it without formatting. So So it looks plain. There we go. All right, so we are ready to go. We have some content in here that we can now stylize. So thinking about stylizing this text, you have to decide how you want the hierarchy to work. I have a couple headlines that I want to have: education, technical skills, design strength, design experience, and design volunteer experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first figure out how I want that to look. I know what font I'm going to use, so I'm going to be using the Lucida Bright. I can find in here. There it is. That's not it. Oh, it's not it. It's the Benton. It's the other one. And I'm just going to do Benton. And let's see what regular looks like now. I want the bold. Okay, there we go. So I know I want my headline to be this typeface, and I'm choosing that because it's the same as this logo, the text here. I'm keeping my typefaces consistent. And I know I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make it 13 point, and I'm going to track it out the same that I did below, which I believe was 50. So trying to, again, keep numbers consistent. You can see that looks pretty nice. And let's kind of take a look at that. And that looks pretty good. I mean, nice, clean headline. Maybe, I mean, yellow is a hard color to work with, so instead I decided to just put a little shape in front of it. So I'm going to hit spacebar twice before and add a little yellow square. Zooming in, I mean, getting nice and close, I can even tell there it was a tiny bit off, is a key to a resume. I mean, this is a great time for attention to detail is in your resume. There we go. Just to add a little shape to it so we know where those key headlines are. Now, once you know that is your headline, what we're going to do is we're going to save this headline so we can reuse it in all the other places. We don't have to redo all that tracking and type size, etc. So that's when character styles comes in play. So if in my character style palette, you'll have no styles to start, which is fine. Here's how you can create a new style. You can delete a style. You can make a folder of styles. Obviously, if you have a dense project like a magazine, you might want to do something like that. Override, and a quick apply. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our type tool and we're going to highlight that text. This is how InDesign is going to know that we want to save this. And I'm going to hit that little new style button. It looks like the same as a new layer button. It's going to save it by the name of character style 1, which is very ambiguous. So I'm going to double click on that and I can give it a new name. So I'm going to call it headline. And if you look down here, it's telling you what it's saving. It's saving my Benton bold 13 point and tracked out 50 points. Is that points? And say okay. So now it saves it. So it knows that this is my headline. So I can come down to my technical skills and just click the word headline and it'll apply. Design strengths, apply. Design experience, apply. And volunteer experience, apply. Now notice that was very easy. That's why this character styles comes into, it works so well. This one is not all caps. So instead of me going back and retyping it in my character palette, if I go to the little hamburger in the upper right hand corner, I can go to all caps and it'll make it all caps for me. Pretty nice. So we have that all saved. We're going to do the same thing for the body copy now. We'll have to add in these bullet points manually, but that's okay. Now, let's do the body copy. So what we're going to do here is we're going to, again, kind of get everything the way that we want it. The typeface we want, the font size, the tracking if we want any, the color, etc. So in this case, this is where I want to do the Lucida Bright. Let me, I keep, oh, there it is. and it looks huge. So I'm going to take this down to 10 point. And I'm going to look at my leading. So here we can see in our leading that my font size is 10, my leading is 12. I'm going to take that up. By a minimum, you always want it 3 points larger than your font size at a minimum. And because 1, I'm trying to stretch this text, and 2, I want it really readable, I'm actually going to stretch it to 15. So it's going to be 10 over 15. Size of our type and the leading, the space between lines. And right away, this looks a lot better. What I wouldn't do here is add any tracking, because that's going to be hard to read. It's going to take up space. So what I'm going to do is save this again. So I'm going to make a new style, and then I'm going to name it Body Copy. And I'll go through and apply this. So now everything is the right size that we want. Now we just have to kind of spruce it up a little bit. So what I would do is, the first thing is I would read through the text. Sometimes designers just forget to read, as silly as that sounds. Looking at this first line, Kutztown University of Pennsylvania, BFA in Communication Design, expected graduation. I think this reads fine. If anything, I could italicize one thing in it. And I would probably choose to do the school name if I wanted to. If I wanted to give it a little bit of texture. Then coming down to the technical, I'm going to hit spacebar twice. Bring down my square. And reading through this, I can see that it has a hyphen. So if I did not want that hyphen, what I could do is highlight that text and go to my paragraph, and there's a little checkbox at the bottom here. Can you see that? That either you can allow hyphenation or not allow. So for a resume, I would suggest not turning that off for both sides. Normally we'd keep it on and add some rules to hyphenation, but today, just because it is a resume, we want it to be a little bit cleaner. So going through that, now, do I like the word acrobat alone? No, but let's leave it there for a second. Let's see if we find any other widows. All right, design strengths looks good. Maybe I'd want to add some bullet points in front of all these if I, again, wanted to add a little texture or try to bring that yellow in again. So my next thought is to read through. Make sure, again, you don't have any typos. Make sure, again, I'll move this down so this one has a bullet point, that it's reading correctly. Now, let's go to the tricky part, which is the design experience and volunteer experience. So this is a graphic design position at the library and a volunteer experience at Designathon. So both of these have 3 bullet points. If you look over here, I have them already set up. So basically what I want to do is I want to have the name, what the position was, and the dates. And then I want to bullet point all the key points or the objectives of this project, of this job. So looking at this, I see one typo that I have to take out. Anyhow, I'll put the word present. Couple things I want to note. Notice how I created hierarchy by adding the italic to the first line, then non-italic, and then bulleting all the key objectives of this job and hanging the bullets. This is something that as a designer you have to do. I just heard in senior portfolio that they had to go over how to hang bullets. Let's stop that so we don't have to worry about that when we get to senior year. Hanging the bullets just means see how the bullet hangs off and then all the text lines up in a line under it. So that's what we're going to do for both of these. So let's hop back over and get this going. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to italicize the name, and I can do that, and I could save that as a style if I wanted to. It's only in 2 spots, so I'm not as concerned. Let me fix that typo I saw here. And then I have to, let me delete how I did my bullet points so I can show you. So what we have here is another issue that I see. So looking at this, I don't like how it has Kutztown, PA on a new line. And I don't like how Acrobat's by itself. So what we can do is if I decide at this point that I want to try to make my type size for my body copy a bit smaller, all I need to do to try that out is go to my character styles, since this is all the body copy. I already set that. And I can double click on it. And you can see here that I can change some parameters in it. So I could go to my basic character formats and try, instead of 10 point, maybe 9 point, and see what that looks like. Say, I could preview it. I'm gonna say okay. So 9.1 I think looks better, just overall. It's nice and small, which graphic designers always like. It fixed our Acrobat issue, and it almost fixed our Kutztown issue. We still do have a little bit of space here to our margin, so I might just expand that a little bit further so I can get that on one line. Now I feel like that is a better solution to the problem. So reading the text and finding out where those little widows and orphans are that you might have to fix. All right, last but not least is our bullet points. So hanging bullets. There's a couple different ways to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it. I want to have a bullet here, here, and here. So there's 3 bullets. I'm going to use my Wingdings. It's a font that's already in your character palette. I never know what wingding I want, so I just kind of type a couple letters out, random letters, and then I'll go over to my character palette and go to Wingdings. And you might have Wingdings 1, 2, or 3. You could choose any of these. You can use whatever kind of wingding you want. I'm going to use something in here. I don't know what. Oh, that little diamond I liked. There we go. So I have my hanging bullet here that I can copy and paste 3 times so it kind of matches up. And I can hit spacebar, but you can see it does put a pretty nice indent in there. And that's up to you if you want to keep that or not. We'll keep it for today. Let's see what happens. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight those 3 bullets. And I'm going to go to my paragraph palette. Now, in the paragraph palette, this is where we do our center, left align, right align. We're going to keep it left aligned, and we're going to go to the next 2 little drop downs. So one is the indent. So you can see if I go on that first one, it's going to indent the entire paragraph, which is fine for an extent, but we just want to hang the bullet, not the whole thing. So I'm going to take that back and down to 0. And basically usually how this works is whatever your font size is. So mine is 9 point. So I'm going to put 9 point in there. It's going to give me a number. It's going to do the translation in inches. And then the one underneath that, you're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be a negative whatever you did before. So I did 9 point, so I must do negative 9 point. And what that does is it hangs our bullets kind of nicely for us. So that's kind of my trick to hanging bullets. You can see that you can kind of, fiddle with that a tiny bit to kind of make it how you want it to, but that looks pretty good. Now, lastly, what you might want to do is add a little bit of space at the end of each bullet, extra space. So that's going to be over here, and I'm just going to do the smallest that I can do, which is a 0.0625. So I just up that. And that adds a little bit of space for reading. So if I read that now, that reads a lot better. And I still kind of hate that little extra space, but I would probably play with it a little bit more. Let's see if we get rid of that. And still, I'd probably really kind of just fix that so it lines up nicely. And then I would do the same thing for down here with Designathon. So what this does is it kind of organizes us. We look like we know typography, we know about hanging bullets, we know about headlines and hierarchy, And when we preview that, I'll go back to the other one since it's finished. You can see that we have a pretty decent looking resume to start. I'm going to save this as an INDD. So I'm going to do save as INDD and hit save. So remember, an InDesign document is kind of like your PSD or your AI. You're only going to be able to open this in InDesign. And then I'm going to save it as a PDF. So file, export, high quality PDF, and just save it in there. There we go. So that's the basics of InDesign, how to save, how to work your style sheets, and how to create your resume.